It seems there is a rhythm to the way things happen. A sound begins, it stays for a while, and then it is gone. Usually, we are listening to the sound itself. We follow the melody or the words. We track the noise of the tires on the pavement outside or the hum of a refrigerator in the corner of the kitchen. But if you wait, there is a moment after the sound ends and before the next one starts. It isn't a long time. It isn't a deliberate thing. It is just the way the air feels when nothing is moving through it. Thoughts seem to work in a similar way. One appears. It has a shape. It has a direction. It carries a certain weight or a specific color. And then, it simply isn't there anymore. For a brief second, the mind is just there. It isn't doing anything. It isn't going anywhere. It is just a surface. We don't usually call it anything. We don't mark the occasion. It is just the briefest flicker of nothing in particular. Like a blink that we don't realize we are doing. It happens, and then the next thought arrives to take its place. There are times when the room is very quiet, and the mind seems to match that quiet without any help. It isn't a choice. It isn't something that requires effort or a specific posture. It is more like noticing that the wind has stopped blowing against the side of the house. You might be looking at a glass of water on a table, or perhaps you are looking at the way the light hits a particular scuff mark on the floorboards. In those moments, there isn't a narrative. There isn't a story about the glass or a history of the floor. There is just the seeing. The thoughts that were there a moment ago, the plans for tomorrow, the memory of a conversation have drifted off. They haven't been pushed away. They just reached their natural end. In the gap they leave behind, there is a stillness. It is quite ordinary. It is a very plain kind of silence that doesn't ask for anything. It doesn't need to be filled, though it usually is, eventually. We have names for almost everything. We name the types of clouds. We name the different shades of blue in the sky at dusk. We name the feeling of being tired or the feeling of being hurried. But these small pauses between our internal sentences don't have a common name. They are the nothings that happen throughout the day. You might be standing by the window, waiting for the kettle to boil. For a handful of seconds, you aren't thinking about the tea. You aren't thinking about the heat. You are just standing. Your mind is like an empty hallway. These moments are rarely mentioned because there is nothing to say about them. They are defined by what isn't there. There is no drama in them, no conflict, no resolution. They are just the spaces where the thinking stops for a breath before it starts again. They are as common as the gaps between the trees in a forest. If you look closely at a printed page, you see the black letters. They form the words, and the words form the ideas. But the white space around the letters is what makes them readable. Without that background, the letters would just be a solid block of ink. Awareness seems to have its own kind of white space. Between the end of one mental image and the beginning of the next, there is a clear patch. It is a moment of pure awareness without an object. It is very brief, so brief that it is easy to overlook. When you notice it, it might feel like stumbling into a room you didn't know was in your house. You aren't doing anything in the room. You are just standing there, looking at the walls. Then, a thought pulls you back out into the hallway, and you continue on your way. But for that second, the space was there. It was wide, and it was empty. It is interesting how often these gaps go unnoticed. We are habituated to the content. We like the movement. We are drawn to the flickering of the screen, the sound of the voice, the progression of the logic. The silence feels like a technical difficulty. If the mind stops moving for a second, the instinct is to kickstart it. We reach for a phone. We hum a tune. We start a new conversation with ourselves about why we are standing still. The gap is skipped over because it doesn't seem to offer anything useful. It doesn't solve a problem. It doesn't provide entertainment. It is just a neutral clearing. We move through these clearings dozens, perhaps hundreds of times a day, always stepping over them to get to the next thing we need to think about. We treat them like the floor, something we walk on but rarely stop to look at. We are always headed toward the next thought, convinced that the next one will be the important one. There is a habit we have of filling the silence. It is almost like a physical reflex. When the internal monologue pauses, there is a slight tension, a sense that something is missing. We fill it with a worry, a plan, or even just a repetitive phrase. We are very good at decorating the emptiness. Even when we are alone in a quiet place, the mind is often busy building structures. It builds memories of things that happened years ago. It builds scenarios for things that might never happen. It fills the space with noise because the noise feels like us. But the space itself doesn't need the noise. The space remains even when the decorations are gone. If you stop talking to yourself for just 3 seconds, the space is there. It doesn't change. It doesn't get smaller. It just waits. It is a steady background that doesn't mind being ignored. It is there when you are busy, and it is there when you are not. Sometimes, the attention drifts without any particular direction. You aren't thinking about anything specific, but you aren't exactly focused on the present either. You are just drifting. It is like being on a boat when the engine is turned off. You are still moving, but it is the water that is moving you, not the motor. In this state, thoughts arise and dissolve like bubbles on the surface of a stream. They don't seem to belong to a sequence. One might be about a piece of fruit. The next might be about a person you haven't seen in a decade. Between those bubbles, there is the stream itself. The drifting isn't a problem to be fixed. It is just a different pace. It is a way of seeing how much space there actually is when we aren't trying to drive the mind toward a destination. The destination usually turns out to be just another thought anyway. There is a difference between thinking and noticing. Thinking is an active process. It is a construction. It is something the mind does with effort, even if the effort is so practiced that we no longer feel it. Noticing, on the other hand, is passive. When you notice the weight of your coat on your shoulders, you aren't thinking about the coat. You are simply aware of the sensation. When you notice a pause in your own thoughts, you aren't thinking about the pause. You are just there, with it. Thinking is like the lines drawn on a map. Noticing is like the land the map is trying to describe. Most of our lives are spent on the lines of the map. We follow the routes of our logic and our habits, but every now and then, the ink runs dry. For a moment, we are just on the land. We are just in the room. We are just in the body. And then, we find a new pen and start drawing again. Stillness often feels like something we have to create. We look for a quiet room or a park. We wait for the house to be empty. We think of stillness as a condition of the environment. But there is a stillness that is already present, regardless of what is happening outside. It is the stillness of the observer. Even when the mind is racing, even when there is a lot of noise, there is a part of the experience that isn't moving. It is the part that knows the noise is happening. It is like the air in a room where a loud party is going on. The air isn't the party. The air doesn't dance. The air is just the medium that allows the sound to travel. When we find those tiny gaps between thoughts, we are catching a glimpse of that medium. We are seeing the background that doesn't move. It isn't trying to be still. It simply is still because it has no parts that can move. These pauses happen in the most ordinary places, while you are washing a plate, while you are waiting for an elevator, while you are looking at the red light of a traffic signal. For a few seconds, the mind just lets go. It isn't a profound experience. It is very small. You might just be staring at the way the soapy water bubbles in the sink. The narrative of your day stops for a moment. You aren't someone with a schedule or someone with a past. You are just a person with their hands in warm water. Then the light changes, or the plate is clean, and the thoughts rush back in. You remember what you have to do next. You remember who you are supposed to be. But the gap happened. It was a small window of time where nothing was required of you, not even a thought. These moments are the stitches that hold the fabric of our experience together, even if we only ever look at the pattern. Silence can sometimes feel unfamiliar. We live in a world that is very loud, not just with sound, but with information. There is always something to look at, something to read, something to react to. When that input stops, the internal silence can feel heavy. It can feel like a pressure in the ears or a void in the chest. We aren't used to the lack of aboutness. We are used to our thoughts being about something. When a thought ends and another doesn't immediately follow, the mind finds itself in a state of not being about anything. It is just being. This unfamiliarity can make us jumpy. We feel the need to find a subject. We feel the need to resume the movement. It is like being in an elevator when it stops between floors. Even if we are safe, the lack of movement feels wrong. We are so used to the going that the arriving feels like a mistake. There is a certain discomfort that can come with mental quiet. It isn't necessarily a bad feeling, but it is an unsettled one. It is the feeling of being off the clock. When we aren't thinking, we aren't producing, we aren't solving, we aren't protecting ourselves. To the part of the mind that is always on guard, silence feels like a lapse in security. We might find ourselves creating problems just so we have something to think about. We might re-examine an old regret or worry about a future possibility, simply because the activity of worrying feels more normal than the stillness of the gap. But if we stay with the discomfort for a moment, it begins to soften. It turns out that the silence isn't a threat. It is just a lack of noise. It is a neutral space. The discomfort isn't coming from the silence. It is coming from the habit of trying to escape it. Eventually, the thoughts always return. It is what the mind does. It is like a spring that is designed to flow. You cannot stop the water, and there is no reason to try. A thought might start as a faint whisper, a word, a name, a fragment of a song, or it might arrive as a sudden realization. I forgot to lock the door. I wonder what time it is. The return of thought isn't a failure of the silence. It is just the next thing happening. The interesting part is the transition. There is a moment where you can see the thought forming before you are fully inside it. It is like watching a fog bank roll in from the sea. For a moment, you can see both the clear sky and the approaching mist. You see the thought as an event, rather than as the whole world. Then, the mist surrounds you, and you are back in the narrative. There is a rhythm to it. Thinking and pausing. Thinking and pausing. It is like breathing. You inhale, there is a tiny pause. You exhale, there is a tiny pause. We don't notice the pauses in our breath unless we are looking for them, but they are what make the rhythm possible. The mind has its own respiration. When we start to see this rhythm, the thoughts feel less frantic. They are just the in-breath of the mind, and the gaps are the out-breath. The goal isn't to stop breathing. The goal isn't to stay in the pause forever. That would be impossible. The rhythm is the point. The movement and the stillness work together. One defines the other. The thought gives the silence a boundary, and the silence gives the thought a place to exist. They are two parts of the same pulse. Sometimes, you can find the awareness that is observing the thought arise. It is a strange perspective. Usually, we are the thought. If we are angry, we are the anger. If we are curious, we are the curiosity. We are the passenger inside the car, looking out the window. But in the gap, you are the road. When a thought starts to appear, you see it coming. You see it take shape. You see it grab your attention. And for a split second, you are the one watching the process. You are the space in which the thought is moving. This perspective doesn't change the thought. The worry is still a worry. The plan is still a plan. But because you saw it arrive, it feels a little less solid. It feels like something that is passing through, rather than something that is staying. You are the host, and the thoughts are just guests who don't stay very long. The feeling of the space between thoughts is often a feeling of lack. Not a lack of something important, but a lack of a story. Most of the time, we are telling ourselves a story about who we are and what we are doing. I am going to the store because I need milk. I am tired because I stayed up late. In the gap, the story stops. There is no I doing anything. There is just the experience of the room, the weight of the body, the temperature of the air. It is a very raw way of being. It is space without a narrative. It can feel empty, but it is also very light. There is no luggage in the gap. You don't have to carry your reputation there. You don't have to carry your mistakes. You are just a point of awareness in a quiet moment. It is the only place where you are truly caught up with yourself. Time seems to change when the thoughts stop. When we are thinking hard, time can move very fast or very slow. We get lost in thought, and 20 minutes disappear. Or we are waiting and thinking about the waiting, and every second feels like a minute. In the silence, time feels different. It feels thick. Without a sequence of ideas to measure the passing of moments, time becomes a single, continuous now. It doesn't feel like it's passing because there's no next thing to compare it to. It is like looking at a still lake. You know the water is there, and you know time is happening, but there are no waves to show you the movement. You are just suspended in the present. It is a brief taste of a time that doesn't have a clock, and then a thought about the time arrives, and the clock starts ticking again. It is curious why these spaces always feel so brief. Even when we notice them, they seem to vanish the moment we acknowledge them. "Oh, I'm not thinking about anything," we say to ourselves, and with that sentence, the silence is gone. The thought about the silence has replaced the silence itself. It is like trying to catch a shadow. The act of reaching for it is what makes it disappear. The gaps are naturally short because the mind is a machine built for motion. It isn't a defect that they are brief. They aren't meant to be lived in. They are meant to be passed through. They are the joints in our mental armor. They are small, but they are what allow the whole structure to be flexible. If the gaps were longer, we might not be able to function. They are exactly as long as they need to be. The memory of these silent moments tends to fade very quickly. When you have a great idea, you remember it. When you have a worrying thought, it stays with you. But when you have a moment of no thought, there is nothing for the memory to hold on to. Memory likes content. It likes hooks. It likes a beginning, a middle, and an end. Silence has none of those things. So, we forget how often we are actually silent. We look back at our day, and we see a solid block of thinking. We see a wall of noise. We forget the hundreds of times we looked out the window and saw nothing in particular. We forget the seconds of peace between the ring of the phone and the hello. The silence is lost because it didn't leave a footprint. But just because we don't remember it, doesn't mean it wasn't there. The mind always resumes its momentum. It's like a bicycle that has been coasting. Eventually, you have to pedal again to keep from falling over. The thoughts pick up where they left off. The to-do list reappears. The opinions we hold about the world come back online. The sense of being a specific person with a specific life becomes solid again. It feels like waking up, but in reverse. We wake up into the dream of our daily concerns. This resumption is natural. It's the way we navigate the world. We need our thoughts to cross the street, to do our jobs, to care for each other. The space between thoughts isn't a replacement for thinking. It's just the background. The momentum is fine. The noise is fine. It's just helpful to remember that the momentum is happening on something. It's happening in a space that remains still even while we are moving. There is a simplicity in noticing without effort. Usually, we think of paying attention as a kind of work. We focus, we concentrate, we narrow our eyes. We try to grasp the thing we are looking at. But noticing the gap is the opposite of grasping. It's a letting go. It's the moment when the hand opens. You aren't looking for the gap. You are just noticing that, for a second, you stopped looking for anything else. It's a very soft kind of awareness. It doesn't have a sharp edge. It's like the way you notice the temperature of a room. You don't have to go find the temperature. It is already touching you. The silence is already touching the mind. You just have to stop talking long enough to feel it. There is no need to hold on to the space. When we find a moment of quiet, sometimes we try to freeze it. We think, this is it. I should stay here. I should make this last. And of course, that thought is the end of the quiet. The space doesn't need to be defended. It doesn't need to be preserved. It's like the space in a room. You can fill the room with furniture. You can fill it with people. You can fill it with smoke. But the space itself isn't harmed. It isn't displaced. It's still there, inside the furniture and around the people. When you realize that the space is always there, you don't have to worry about losing it. It's there when you are thinking, and it's there when you aren't. It is the one thing you don't have to work to keep. The quiet returns naturally. It's the default state. If you leave a bowl of water alone, the surface will eventually become flat. It doesn't have to try to be flat. It just happens when the splashing stops. The mind is the same. If it isn't being poked by a stimulus or driven by a desire, it settles. The thoughts run their course, and then they stop. The silence isn't something you have to build. It's what's left when you stop building. We spend so much time building. We build identities. We build arguments. We build futures. It's exhausting. The gaps are the moments where we just stop building for a second. We don't have to do anything to make the silence happen. We just have to let the current thought finish its sentence. It helps to think of thought as movement and space as the background. The clouds move across the sky. The birds fly through it. The planes leave trails. But the sky doesn't move. The sky is just the place where the movement happens. We are often so focused on the clouds that we forget about the sky. We think the weather is the only thing happening, but the weather is only possible because the sky is there to hold it. The space between your thoughts is your own internal sky. It's vast, it's neutral, and it's always there, even on the cloudiest days. You don't have to clear the clouds to know the sky is there. You just have to remember that the clouds have a limit, but the sky does not. The thought has a beginning and an end. The space has neither. So we sit here, or we walk, or we wash the dishes. The thoughts come. They stay for a while. They tell us stories about the world. They tell us who we are and what we should do next. And then they leave. And in that moment, before the next one arrives, there is a small clearing. It is a very quiet place. It doesn't have a name. It doesn't have a purpose. It is just a pause in the music. We don't need to do anything with it. We don't need to understand it. It's just there. It has always been there. It is the silence that makes the sound possible. It is the emptiness that allows the fullness to exist. And then, another thought begins.